you. Appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun. So thank you for the invite. Welcome everyone. And thanks for joining my talk. I'm going to spend time actually coming to the avenue of business partnering through actually non-financial metrics. I think we all are very good at reporting out numbers and looking at historicals and reporting out variances to budget and et cetera. But really, how does the finance team now get a layer deeper into the organization and really through the lens of non-financial metrics? So let's jump right in. And let's see if I can get my screen to work. Here we go. So let's define non-financial metrics. What they really do at a macro level is they help explain and provide context for actually the financial metrics or the financial KPIs. So like I mentioned, we're really good at reporting out on revenue and costs, but what is the underlying impact for some of that revenue and those costs? And I'm gonna, in the next few slides, I'm gonna give some examples of what I mean by that, but it's really about driving context so that people understand what's really happening. Also, it's a good link between from financials to the overall strategy. So strategy may be gaining market share in a certain area of your industry. And so what are some non-financial aspects? Increased marketing spend, for instance, to win over customers, or perhaps increased development into a product line. So what do those look like? And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is non-financial metrics can be leading indicators of the future financial performance. Again, we spend a lot of time looking backwards and how things went and how they compared to our expectations. But when you think about, for instance, investment in a product line, and then the success of that investment as that product reaches market, we can then kind of understand what those revenues might look like in the future, or what new customers you might be able to gain in the future. So this is what I mean throughout the presentation. This is the context, or this is what defines the non-financial metrics as we think through what aspects finance can introduce into the organization. So here's an example. I'm calling this the customer journey. And on the left side, you see there, think of this as a traditional e-commerce company. So an individual shows up at your website, and there's multiple avenues of where that customer can go. They can search for a product, they can compare prices, they can read reviews, right? So as you think about all the different touch points that a customer can engage in on your website, you can start to track things like, well, how many people visited the homepage, right? How often did they show up? How did you interact with that customer? Was it a paid channel through paid search, or was it a free channel, meaning an email perhaps, or a text push notification? How many of those people who visited your homepage came back? When they got there and they purchased, what was their purchase path? So you can begin to measure just number of steps in that checkout flow. Where did that customer abandon their, in that checkout flow process? How many of your customers actually bought your product? So what was the take rate? 100 people showed up, 2 people bought, so 2% take rate. And then another aspect is, an account. We all, I'm sure, have, whether it's an Amazon account or your favorite e-commerce site, you have an account. So what are some of the tools that your company has built where a customer can manage their account? So whether they want to deal with customer service, or they want a return or get a refund or something. So then you can start to measure how many people were actually engaging with their account, and then what the successful metric was for customer service. Did they get what they wanted? Did they get the return? So this is a very sort of broad view of just a traditional e-commerce view. But if you think about from a finance perspective, and you just flip it over and you think about it differently, and you think about where do they come from? So let's understand the context of what happened. So it's very easy for the marketing team to be like, oh, I spent all this marketing and I made all this money, I generated all this revenue. But let's measure ROAS, so return on ad spend. Let's dig in deeper. And did that marketing spend actually increase or decrease over time? So did we increase marketing and increase sales? Or did we increase marketing, but unfortunately sales decreased? So now you can link actual spend to what you're seeing on the P&L revenue-wise. What type of marketing spend was it? So was it upper funnel or was it very targeted? So those two are going to drive different outcomes from a purchase, from a take rate perspective. Was the marketing spend, was it brand? So were we just creating awareness, or was it very specific or intent to buy? We have this one product, it has these attributes to it, and we think you should buy, right? So what type of spend was it? Were there seasonal campaigns? So for instance, do you have a product that has a spike in a particular time of the year? You want to disaggregate that. You want to pull that out of your results. You want to understand what the base business is doing versus a seasonal spike. And then what channels are you selling it in? Is it direct to consumer, or is it brick and mortar? Are they coming to your site? Do you have affiliates that you work with? So now all of a sudden you can take a purchase path or a path of a customer to your site, and you can begin to unwind some of the attributes that your marketing team did. So as you think about, again, the customer journey, how did they get to the other side of it and actually purchase or not purchase? And then there's traditional metrics around this, CPC, cost per click, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value. What does your site traffic look like in general? So it's really about shifting that lens in this example of just a customer coming to your website. So if you think about finance and you think about that leadership role, right, and you think about business partnering with the marketing team in this example, right, it's all about analyzing and reporting on what is driving both revenue and your margin. So using the context that I was describing earlier, and then measuring those critical metrics, like increase or decrease marketing spend, what specific channels do we go after? And the core of this is really about asking questions to the people in the know. And that could be your chief marketing officer, or it could be perhaps a data analyst on the marketing team. So you need to go in there, you need to get in there and interact with those individuals. And then really this is all about collaboration. This isn't about, I'm going to call you out, or I'm going to, I don't think there's enough efficacy in your marketing spend. This is all about collaborating with the marketing team to, what I just simply say is, get to the truth. And that's, I think, a lot of what finance does, is try to get to the truth, because your head of sales, your head of marketing may want to send a different message to the leadership team, but finance is in there and collaborating with them to get to the truth. So that's one very concrete example of how finance can really dive deep in and be a business partner in this example with the marketing team. So byproduct of all that, and as you think through that, so how does this then empower your finance teams? And so really, I think most of us understand that finance is the hub and across the disciplines in the org. So that could be marketing, that could be the development team, that could be your production team, your customer service team. We kind of see it all and hear it all. And what you really want to do here with some of these non-financial metrics is you want to translate what is going on in the financials and not just report out a revenue number or a cost number. So it's really about the translation and the context. And what that empowers your teams to do now is that they're that much smarter on their inputs for the scenario planning, right? Because they have that additional context. And then, like I mentioned on marketing, they're spending more or less. You can start to compare changes in the way that you're operating the organization, in your spend, and then your performance. So like I was mentioning, did we spend more in marketing, but sales actually didn't interact accordingly? Or did we launch a brand new product, but high defects? So you can start to see the changes that happen. And then external forces is really a big one. So really just understand what's in your control, which is kind of number 4, which is what's in your control and what's out of your control. And you need to be able to disaggregate those. You may have a competitor in your space who decides that they're going to double down and triple their marketing spend in order to gain market share and steal your customers away. So what is that external force? You may have a supplier issue. And then again, evaluate what's in your control. So how do you play defense and not let that competitor steal your customers? So you can really start to weaponize some of this non-financial data and metrics to translate ultimately what's happening in the financials and read it off the page a lot easier to your audience, which is the executive team or the board of directors. So now your finance team is far more empowered because they have that information and they understand the context. But with that, right, data is king. And so we're all in different scenarios with what data we have, what data is easily accessible or not. So data gathering and reporting is obviously critical to all of this. And in the same way that you're going to partner with these groups to understand what is happening within the organization, you also need to partner with them to understand what tools they're using for their tracking. Are they using Google Analytics to understand what's happening on their website? Do you have an internal piece of software that tracks and helps you understand your manufacturing process? Do you have a development team, and are you tracking what they do? Do you have an organization that's set around understanding what people are building what and where you're allocating those human resources? And then some of you may have the luxury of having a data science team, for instance. So you can lean on them and have them help you understand and navigate through some of the data. So really data gathering obviously is critical. And then what tools do you use, right, to aggregate this and then display it? So what BI tools? Again, everybody's going to be in different areas within that, some more advanced than others, which that's fine. And then finally, what is that regular reporting cadence? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly? Right? What dashboards can you begin to create? So again, empowering that finance team to understand the context, but then understand the critical data itself, where it comes from, how to gather it, how to aggregate it. So put them in charge of that, give them that ability and that responsibility. But again, everyone's going to be different in the how your organization is structured and works. So as we think through then those assets of your finance team in those financial metrics, what is the impact to your team? What development opportunities exist ultimately across your organization? And what you have here is you begin to create leadership roles within your specific organization. So you may have, and this can be from a senior vice president all the way down to an analyst. First and foremost, you can expand the scope of your team from simply reporting to taking a step back and actually gathering the data to then understanding the context. So how do they identify it? How do they track it? What are we measuring? And how do we analyze it? And then you can do this across the various disciplines: marketing, production, like I said, development. So they're not just reporting out, or they're not just doing a budget. They're not just booking journal entries even potentially. So you can start to expand their scope. You can allow them the power to provide that context for the deeper meaning. So as you report out your monthly results, for example, your finance team now has the ability to expand on the results and drive deeper meaning, which is obviously far more valuable to the executive team that you're reporting out to than just saying revenue was up 5%. And then we all love forecasting and planning. So how do you improve the accuracy? So like I mentioned earlier, as these inputs, as you understand the non-financial metrics and their context, you can introduce them into your scenario planning and ultimately improve the accuracy, which everyone will benefit from as you think about planning, whether it's the next month, quarter, or year. So now your finance team is seen as a leader in that space. And then finally, you can influence outcomes. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the next few slides. But really, it's about finance being the partner at the table and understanding, hey, this has worked historically. Should we do more of that? Or we tested that and it unfortunately didn't work. So how do we pivot? So now you can be that influencer because you have the context of both the numbers, the actual results themselves, but then those non-financial metrics that come together. So you can have you're a better sounding board. So it's all about leadership, and it's all about expanding your team's responsibility, roles, and pushing them out of their comfort zone. So as you think about your team, whether it's 5 people or 100 people, this is just one example, is how do you then structure your team around around your organization and allow them to be empowered and take on these leadership roles. So these are simply ideas. I'm sure we all have our own opinions, but for instance, you could take your finance team and your business partner aspect or side of it, and maybe have a vertical around your customer. So just understanding your customer top to bottom, whether it's their interaction on the website, how many people bought, what is the retention? So how many of those customers came back? How many fell off? So now you can really dive deep and you can be a better advocate for the marketing team and the sales team, and any go-to-market strategies that you have around the customer. So think about that, like how do you engage and how are you structured around your customer, and you can dedicate a finance resource to that. The next one is operations. I'm sure we all have a customer service team. All of us, for manufacturing, what does your delivery look like? Your product that you manufacture are defects. Or do you have a 99% success rate in whatever it is that your company does? So have a finance team that is really diving deep with those operations teams and understand that. Employees, right? A lot of companies say that employees are their greatest asset. So what is the productivity? So you can work with the HR team in this case. What is average hire time? What does the turnover in your organization look like? So you can dive deeper from an employee, so an internal view. So not so much, well, as you say, not so much financial, but some of these actually are in fact financial, right? The longer it takes you to hire someone, that's lost productivity. The more turnover there is, there's more disruption in your business. So how do you reduce turnover? How do you reduce average time to hire? How do you increase productivity? So you can have a team looking at that. And then finally, all of this, as we know, comes down to financials. So how do you organize your team around bringing all of this together and analyzing and aggregating your revenues, your costs, your cash flow, whatever other financial metrics you're reviewing. So now you can start organizing your team around and let them go deep. So instead of breadth, you have an opportunity to go deep in certain areas, critical areas within your organization, whatever that looks like, depending on what industry you're in. So that's one way to think through structuring a team and empowering them to be a business partner. And then once they become that business partner, once you've ingested them into those organizations, what roles can they play? And it runs the gamut. So they can be a thought partner. So they can walk in the room and they can sit with the marketing team, the development team, and play devil's advocate with some of the ideas they have. You can be the voice of reason. Again, you're uninhibited, so to speak, with the outcome. You just want the right thing, whereas maybe sales or marketing or production might have ulterior motives and different messages they want to send. You can play devil's advocate. You can be the voice of reason. You can help influence conversations. So now you're a partner at the table and sitting elbow to elbow with the individuals who lead and run those teams. That's one aspect or one role you can take. Here I've called it engineering. We all as finance people, we love processes. We love systems. That's how we scale our productivity. So why not go into another part of the organization and review their processes and their systems and take a lot of what you've learned to make your job easier and more efficient and help them. Someone can be a trusted counselor. Sometimes, an executive just needs to, in a private one-on-one conversation, talk to finance. You can be their confidant. That's where you can share your gut instinct. You can challenge them. So again, in the privacy, in a one-on-one setting, as opposed to a thought partner scenario where you might be in a conference room thinking through things and debating things. Finance oftentimes can very much become a trusted counselor, but you can't get to that trusted counselor role until you've shown a level of competence that you understand their business and you understand all the attributes of it, non-financial and financial. And then finally, you can be their muse, as the different leaders of the different groups are thinking about what's next, what's the white space, how do we rethink things, what's some fresh thinking. You can provide aspects like that. Again, finance folks have a very different view of things, and they approach problems a different way than maybe some of the other groups. So you can be as you whiteboard, as you think through bigger and better projects, you can play that role as well. So, and not everyone in your organization is going to have these abilities. and some are going to do this better than others. And so you'll figure that out over time. So as you find the right spot for your finance team to be that business partner, a lot of these roles, you're going to understand who specifically fits best into each of these roles. So then as you think about that, then you start to identify, well, what are the attributes for your team and the individuals on your team for them to be successful? So you need to find people who on your team who are just simply interested. They love exploring different options and evaluating what those options are. And they want to ask questions and they want to spark a conversation and they want to push the envelope. They're truly interested in that space. You might have, so again, going to my marketing example, you might have an individual or group of individuals on your team who are very excited, interested in marketing, and others might be very excited and interested in supply chain. So match those and marry those, because that level of interest is going to be the backbone for that individual to be successful. You want teams that are inquisitive and that have the courage to ask questions. They are fine debating topics and they'll just keep digging and digging. And so you want that skill set, you want that person to have that attribute just ingrained in them. And then as we think about, earlier we were talking about being a thought partner to some of these groups. So, you want to talk through, you want to have some foresight. Well, what might happen if we do this? And then model out and try and predict the outcomes, right? Put pen to paper and understand all the different aspects and the different choices we could make and what that would look like. And let's put some financial rigor around it. So what does it look like? What's around the corner? And finally, you need someone who's a storyteller as well, right? Can they do presentations? What do their visuals look like? Do they know and understand their audience? So can they bring this together? Are they preparing a presentation for the board of directors, or is it an internal working session? So you need someone who can then take this and understand it and turn it into a story as well. So those are some of the attributes you want to carve out. And then kind of bring this all back together. There's just a multitude of development pathways that now are created as you think about business partnering. So it's professional development, and this is all levels of the staff. So it's not just your junior staff, and it's not your senior vice president of finance or your CFO. All levels within the org can create this alignment with teams and non-financial metrics. You become now the sounding board for future undertakings. Again, like I said, if you're in the room and you're the thought partner, et cetera, you now will continue to play that role as the organization thinks about what their future looks like. You become a trusted partner. And here I say, impact wide-ranging parts of the organization, because now in theory, you've touched all of them, or you've organized your team around the different parts of the organization. So now finance has the ability and the insight to go and actually make an impact. And then I think really to bring this all together, which is perhaps one of the most powerful pieces of all this, is now you begin to create a culture of collaborative planning. So I know there's some organizations, in talking to finance folks and other groups, finance is sort of over there or on the side or just report the numbers. But as these groups begin to think through planning, they're like, no, I have to have a finance person in the room. I need to collaborate with them. I need that additional context or that thought partner, or I need to be challenged. So now it becomes collaborative, and they being the heads of the different parts of the organization want finance in the room with them as they think through and planning, and it becomes collaborative, not, I just sent my numbers to finance. So that is it. I'm going to stop sharing. And I think at this point, we can take questions.
Yes, Peter, thank you for that. Some really good insights there. I enjoyed that presentation. Let me jump straight into a couple of the questions that have already come through. The first one's from Rob, and Rob has asked, how do you see the responsibility for interpreting non-financial metrics, as there is a link between the marketing team, analytics, and the finance team?
The marketing team was it analytics?
Marketing, beg your pardon, marketing, analytics, and finance.
Yeah, exactly. This is an interesting one, because what A lot of what we do here, so at Ticketmaster, we have a very large marketing budget. And where we spend our time trying to digest is attribution of that marketing spend. So you've got a marketing team or a marketing analytics team that says, hey, I spent $1 million and these radio ads or this banner or this social media drove X, Y, and Z. Those are all, in some instances, vanity metrics. And what I mean by that is they're really nice top-line metrics. But what you can do is you can start understanding or working with the marketing team to truly get where did that click really come from? And then from that click, another one we think about is cohorts. So when the marketing analytics team says, hey, I spent $1 million on social media and it drove 1 million clicks to our site, was it a particular demographic that came to your site? Was it centered around a specific product? What did those individuals do when they got to their site? Did they actually buy or did they just search? Did they poke around? So you can start asking questions about what may arguably be, and I don't want to call it really all of them are vanity metrics, but you can maybe take what marketing analytics might describe as I got 1 million clicks, great vanity metric, but what did they do? What was the take rate? And you can just start challenging it, not in a confrontational way, but you can start challenging what did they do? What was the outcome? And then you can say, yeah, you spent on marketing, but actually sales are down. Or the opposite. A little bit of marketing and your sales were 10x. So you can start applying other attributes to some of those marketing analytic data points that come out.
Thank you. And thanks, Rob, for that question. That actually leads nicely into a question from Joe, who's asked, what are some of the non-financial metrics that you use to benchmark for business every month or quarter?
Yeah. Every month we look at, for example, we have an app, a Ticketmaster app, which gets a lot of usage. And so on a monthly basis, we look at the attributes of a customer interacting with the app. So did they buy a ticket? How many apps were downloaded? What is our rating on our app? What new product or design functionality did we release on the app? So that would be something that we do monthly, because to try and say, oh, I sold 10 tickets today on the app and I sold 11 tickets, the next day is not really useful. But if you start looking at month over month, for instance, for sales velocity around the app, for example, you can start seeing a trend or usage. People spend 30 seconds on the app and then now they're spending 1.5 minutes. So you can start seeing trend lines. You don't need to see that every day, for example. However, on the production side, and for us, production is putting shows on sale. We track that every day. So how many new shows went on sale today? How many tickets did we sell for those shows? So that's more of a daily view than just a pure sort of what happened today, and we track it day to day to day. And then on a quarterly basis, a lot of it is our profitability trends and labor. So we look at labor quarter to quarter. How many people do we add? How many people, and then turnover. So it just depends on the criticality of that in the day-to-day running of the business.
Brilliant, thanks. And thanks, Joe, for that question. A question's come through from Anonymous, but we've had similar questions throughout the last couple of days of our forum, and it is, how are you seeing scenario planning has changed over the last 12 months? And I mentioned that it's a common theme because I think a lot of companies are going through multiple different scenario plannings over the last 12 months of turbulence.
Yeah. Yeah, 12 months of turbulence is an understatement. Yeah, I mean, just to give you a little bit of context, Ticketmaster back in March of 2020 went to 0 revenue almost overnight. And so our scenario planning changed month to month, quarter to quarter, depending on what we were dealing with. And we were really dealing with a lot of cash preservation issues, given the top line, the decline in top line. But scenario planning, the way, the pushback that I always give, or one of the lenses that I always have is, there's always more work to be done than you have people to do the actual work itself. And so that's what I always come back to. So I think scenario planning, I think everybody has an idea of where we want to be. So in other words, what are our priorities? What are strategic priorities for your organization? I think at the macro level, everyone hopefully has those, and those are reasonable, attainable, but also the right thing. So let's just go with your strategic priorities at a macro level are the right things. To me, I always go back to execution and operational excellence. And to the extent that you don't have the resources, or maybe some of the resources you have are weak, scenario planning always has to dovetail with what you can actually produce. Because if you put too much out there in your scenario planning, you're setting yourself up for failure. So whether it's looking at low, medium, high scenarios on your sales, which then will in turn drive how many individuals you need to operationalize that, which then in turn will drive how many units you need to deliver at what time. All of those cascade. But to me, the overarching, so I think that's, I'll call it the easy part. I think the reality though is, do we actually have people to deliver and perform this function or whatever this is, this scenario? And if the answer is no, that's not really a scenario, right? Or you better figure out how you're going to staff it. So all of a sudden, scenarios start to fall off the page because you simply don't have the resources, human resources, capital resources, and however you define it, you just may not be able to actually deliver on it.
Brilliant, thank you. One question's just come through from Denisa, who asks, are you benchmarking your non-financial KPIs to platform businesses, lead conversion, retention, acquisition, churn, etc.?
So yeah, we're always comparing ourselves to the competition, if that's the question. So yeah, you absolutely want to benchmark. So if you're an e-commerce company, you want to benchmark against other e-commerce companies. If you have a SaaS model versus a product, does your product, is it price sensitive? Is there a lot of competition, minimal competition? What are the barriers to entry, right? These are all going to sort of derive and deliver thoughts around how you really truly benchmark, who you benchmark against, and how you benchmark what you're doing against your competitors. But yeah, benchmarking is critical. I just go back to the app scenario. We try to understand the usage on other apps that are competitors in our space. Whether it's activity usage-based or even just attributes of the app itself. In other words, what does the app allow you to do, and how do we compare? So yeah, you need to be mindful of what the benchmark is, because the data can be noisy. It might not be a true one-to-one relationship.
Thank you. And yes, thanks, Denise, for that question. We have one last question from Annie, which is a good one to end on. What skills are you seeing that stakeholders are now requiring from finance business partners?
Yeah, the big one is BI tools, and technology is a big one and critical one. We all have more data in our organizations than we could probably ever get at. So how do you coordinate? How do you collate? How do you show and distribute and display that data, and what makes sense? So that's one. Business partnering, of course, we just spent the last 20 so minutes talking about, is another one. And then finally, I think it comes back to storytelling. I think, we spend all day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, staring at the numbers and trying to understand them. But nobody else in the org really does. So how do we become good storytellers to then enable and allow the leaders to make decisions going forward? Is the balance sheet healthy? Is there risk? Is cash flow going up? Is cash flow going down? There's a lot of financial attributes that we can display that ultimately we need to be able to tell the story, though, of what's going on, not just display the number themselves. So tools, obviously being the business partner as I described, and then finally really storytelling and being that voice across the organization of what the numbers are telling us, and pitching it so people understand it and can digest it, and then hopefully make decisions off of it.
Would you say that those three areas, the tools, the business partner, and the storytelling, they're almost of equal weighting, or would you potentially assign, storytelling is worth 50% of the real importance, and then the other 25? How would you sort of weight those?
Yeah, I think the business partnering is probably at least 50% of it, if not more, is really getting in there and understanding the numbers. Because if you've solved the data gathering part, as I had mentioned, you need to understand what data they're looking at. Once you've solved that, then you know what the inputs are. And on the other end is how do you visualize it? Who's your audience? How do you display it? What is the cadences on the other end? You'll figure that out. But the meat of it is really in the middle with the business partnering and understanding the context and doing that diligence with those partners.